Historically, the union, Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union, been intimately involved in politics and aligned to the People's National Movement. We were called Party Group
Right.
2 in those days. All right. But interestingly, to give a historical background, that our president, C.P. Alexander, right, was not a member of the PNM. But if we transition to 2025 in more recent times, what has happened is that the approach is one more of practicality as opposed to blind allegiance to any political party. Right. And therefore, what we sought to do is to do what I will want to call deep analysis in terms of what is being offered to the labor movement. And we lend our support based on policies as opposed to political parties. All right. So that is the practical approach that we are now taking as the labor movement. But having said that, we recognize that political involvement is part of the landscape that you need as a movement. But in terms of blind loyalty, we do not support that. All right. But we have a living example that I could speak to within the last elections. All right. We would have demonstrated visually our concerns. We would have been part of the debates that the UNC would have called for labor leaders, okay? And we were part of that. And our approach was to have placards and go to the political rallies of the UNC to demonstrate our concerns as labor, and more particularly as Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union, because we have this ongoing issue with the past government where they refused to implement a memorandum of agreement, which speaks to 12% for 2014 to 2017 and changes within the Port Authority. Okay? So that we use the unwillingness of the previous government to engage us, and we use that as our political platform in terms of doing visual demonstration. And when I say visual, I mean placards, 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60 workers with placards, which would have read what are our concerns and what we expect. And that had, I must admit, an impact. All right. Because when the party was launching their candidates in Mokoya by Jack Warner Place, I mean, that had a major impact. And I want to believe that made some changes in the context of how the party would have viewed what the message that we were sending, and more particularly the mechanism that we would have used, which was something totally different. All right. To send the Seamen and Waterfront workers message home, one, and two, to highlight the plight of the dock workers in the Port of Port. I don't think that in Trinidad and Tobago, with the greatest respect, that there was any genuinity in the context of social dialogue. It was a convenient word that was used to suit political parties at a particular time. But in terms of consistency, in terms of what social dialogue means and the outcome that is supposed to get when you engage the social partners, I don't think, I'm not seeing it yet. People talk about it, political party talk about it. But however, we still are experiencing this kind of concept of high power. It will be top down. We make decisions, and you are not really an intimate and integral part of the process where decisions are being made that affect, all right, the workers in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think that is what social dialogue is all about, because you cannot, and we'll continue to argue that, we continue to push for even tripartitism as practiced by the ILO, the UN, which is the only UN body that has a tripartite mechanism for making rules and regulations as it relates to the work and the workplace. And I'm therefore, I am totally disappointed, and it's unfortunate in this modern landscape of industrial relations. We still have to be fighting up with making social dialogue as part of our DNA, as part of our callaloo, as part of our cook, and all this kind. We don't have it. Yes, in words, but in reality, it is not practiced, unfortunately. And we hope that it will change eventually, because labor is a major stakeholder and they must be part of the process. And the only mechanism that you can use is the concept of social dialogue, which has worked in several countries. The government is the biggest employer. All right, one. And we are hoping to reverse the whole question of the contract work, the outsourcing of jobs. Because although the government is the biggest employer, the jobs are not what I want to call sustainable jobs. The jobs is rooted in the concept of contract, outsourcing, and if you want to say individual, and there's a new word, service provider, right? That is now in the industrial relation landscape in Trinidad and Tobago. And we are deeply concerned about that. And I'm speaking here not only as the president now of Seamen's Union, but as the General Secretary of NATUC and also CCL, because across the Caribbean region, we are seeing that kind of approach to industrial relation, which does not augurs well for what I would want to call sustainable employment and decent wages, which the ILO speaks about.
Right. And in respect to participation of the trade union movement, how can it be more effective, even at the highest governance level in organizations and nationally?
All right. Well, first, there must be a buy-in my humble view, that the labor movement is an integral part of whatever is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, if there's that buy-in, we will have a much more appreciation for the role of the trade union movement. But more importantly, we have been articulating in the National Trade Union Center for the issue of legislating the role of the trade union in Parliament in Senate, like it's done in Grenada and these places. Okay. Now that is left for the president to decide. And over the Rowley term, the independent senators, you had no labor representatives. But those independent senators selected by the president. And in this new dispensation, the same things happen. All right. So then we are left out of a critical part of the political process, which is parliament, which makes laws, all right, that governs the citizenry. And therefore, we believe strongly that there must be a change of thinking whereby the labor movement, as of right, must sit at the economic table, must sit at the parliamentary table, must sit at institutions, and we must craft a system where the issue of placing labor representatives as of rights in industries, be it private or public sector, so that the voice of labor will be heard at the decision making process and not after the decisions are made. We have no strength.
Okay.
And why? I will tell you why. There is too much bureaucracy, in my humble view, for recognition. All right. And you have to have 51% to have the right to collective bargaining to become a recognized majority union. But I was put in Trinidad and Tobago to run the country. It was 34%. I could recall the no vote campaign. But the movement is hamstrung by this percentum to get the right to recognize and negotiate with an employer. So that the question I want to ask, if I have 51% of the workforce, I cannot be recognized for collective bargaining purposes.
Mm.
If I have 49%, I cannot be recognized. If I have 48%, I can. So what happens to those groups of workers, the 50% of workers, or the 48% or the 49%? They are left, all right, to swim on their own in an ocean where it have a lot of economic sharks. So I think that we have to rethink and relook how we deal with these rights that you are talking about in the context of making it simple and less bureaucratic, because we hold the view that bureaucracy is the prescription for failure in anything that they want to do. Bring in bureaucracy, and we would like to see that level of bureaucracy um, put aside, and we have a process where if a union or workers want to join a union, they must have the right to vote on that. And if the vote is recognized, but you know what is the process? You have to be in the union for 8 weeks. You have to ensure that the union dues that is paid to the member and by the members are sent to the bank. You have to show them that they did send to the bank the union dues. AAA is a whole process that was constructed, my humble view, to frustrate the process of workers honestly and truly getting representation in a much more simplistic way and in a way which could really speak about that right and that freedom. Because, I mean, a election, we fought for independence, and the right to vote is open to any citizen, right? You don't have to have 51% of the voters to vote. It's first past the post, and if 36% vote and you get 20%, you become the prime minister and you run a country. Right, we are talking about the trade union movement. Why don't we juxtapose in the context of, hey, we really want workers to be represented, because the union, you could say what you say, Brad. Because if right, enjoying the 8 days, or you're enjoying 20 days, or enjoying sick leave, or you're enjoying vacation leave, you're enjoying maternity leave, it's the trade union movement. Right, did that. And then therefore, we must recognize the role and give it the level of prominency and respect that the union deserves, which will translate into the respect of workers one, and workers having a level of dignity, decent pay, and sustainable jobs.
And sticking on the gaps in our legislative framework, do you think that our freedom of association is equally accessible to all categories of employees?
No, it is not. If I'm a contract worker, I cannot join a trade union. As I say, the system is geared where you must have 51% of the workforce to be deemed the recognized majority union, which gives the union the right now under Section 40 of the Industrial Relation Act to engage management. So then, to even think about that, right, given what the law requires, makes it almost impossible. And if you have workers where you're subcontracting out their jobs and you are calling them service providers and they are not deemed workers under they are deemed as independent contractors. In effect, what you are doing is circumventing the Industrial Relation Act to make it impossible for workers to join a union, which ought to be a fundamental democratic right, which ought not to have all these regulations and bureaucracy to hamstring the process.
No. Next question is following the assessment of the strength of collective bargaining in our country, what do you think is the greatest need for support for your union and union movement in Trinidad and Tobago?
All right, what I think one is training and capacity building. Um, most of the older trade unions like myself, we are leaving. All right. And there must be this training and capacity building. There must be a recognition that we are part of the global world of work, and therefore the understanding and the appreciation of what that means and how it impacts our economy is necessary. So the issue of research and development has to be part of the landscape if we are serious about moving forward. We can no longer depend on only strike or tongue in the table, hard. Those days are finished. You have to be able to engage intellectually and pragmatically in order to drive the process and build what I will want to call the new economic poles that is required to sustain Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean region.
And finally, how do you assess the level of collaboration within union movements? And we could also capture civil society and cooperatives.
Unlike other countries, unfortunately, we are bogged down in this question of ideological persuasion. All right. And we have seen at times we come together, all right, when there is an issue. But generally speaking, the cohesiveness that is necessary, the glue to keep us together, which is one voice, one labor movement. All right, it's not there. And the question is how do we, get over that stumbling block? How do we get over that hump? And it is difficult, and it's not for the want of not trying, because I always, in my conversation with our workers, always tell them that when you go to the grocery, they never ask you if you belong to OWTU or Seamen's Union or Contractors and General. They don't want to know that. It's only we foolishly and selfishly hold on to the ideological persuasions that is the root cause of some of the problems that we are having. And I've never seen ideology, right, go in the grocery,
Yeah.
all right, and make you have a basket of goods, and therefore I will continue to argue that the question of the pragmatic approach, the question of facing reality, the question of understanding what is the real world and the real world of work, and how we as trade unionists can do the transformation that was necessary to take us at that other level. And we have a responsibility, and our responsibility is sacred. Our responsibility to make sure that every worker, before he's slightly disadvantaged in the community, is single women and them with children, all that is our responsibility. And it is painful to me that we continue to allow this ideology to get in the way of coming together so that we could build unity in strength. And as I always show people, if you take a bunch of wood and you try to break it with matches, it cannot break. But if you take one and you break it, it will break. And therefore, that is a lesson that we should know, that in unity there is strength, in unity will be better respected, and in unity will be a force to be reckoned with.